Antony Wilshaw, module number 003593, application of football data 2. Today's PowerPoint presentation is titled Dynamic Stretching Impact on 20-meter sprints. Our introduction shows our research. This research goes on to explain warming up is an accepted pre-activity to competition or training. Via that warm-up, a player's body temperature is going to rise, which positively impacts elasticity and viscosity of muscle fibers. Dynamic stretches simulate body movements that are representative to specific sports, in this case football, and football players also sprint 10 to 15 yards every 90 seconds during a game. Further research was carried out to aid us in putting together our own dynamic stretching warm-up package for the players to go through on these tests. The objectives for the tests were to see if dynamic stretching can improve an athlete's performance for sprint tests over 20 meters. It was hypothesized that the test would improve post-dynamic stretching. There were 13 healthy players that took part in the test. They had a mean age of 12.23, standard deviation 0.43. There were 11 white participants and 2 Hispanic participants. The team has a practice schedule of 3 times per week. Each practice lasts an hour and 30 minutes. The subjects had played a competitive game 48 hours prior to the testing, which was on October the 3rd, 2015. And the team was 6 weeks into its 12-week autumn season over the autumn of 2015. All players also wore football boots and football attire, as well as wearing other football equipment. And the participants also consented to this testing cycle along with their parents. The venue of the testing was Stamford, Connecticut in the United States of America. The test date was October the 5th on 2015. The test also took place at 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon local time, and the weather was 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 Celsius, with no wind or rain. The test took place on a 3G turf field. It was a full-size field of 120 yards long by 70 yards wide. A metrics calculator was used to put the 20-meter sprint path together. What we found was that 21.82 yards was the equivalent of 20 meters, which the metrics calculator confirmed for us. After getting that confirmation, we got a yardstick and measured out the 20-meter testing path for the players to run through. As well as that yardstick, we had 21 flat markers that were used to mark out the sprint area, the pre-activity warm-up areas for the players, as well as the dynamic stretching areas for the players. So all areas were set up for the players to move around to. Along with that equipment, we used a MacBook Air computer. We had Bic pens, papers, clipboards, and once we'd gathered all the data at the field, we inputted that into this computer via Excel, Word and PowerPoint, which was an Office 2016 version. Once the players arrived to the field, we explained what was going to happen, why it was going to happen, to put them at ease. The players then split themselves up into 2 groups. With 13 players, we split the groups into 6 players and 7 players. The group of 6 players went away to their pre-prepared warm-up area and played a 4v2 keep ball game, i.e. a rondo, and the group of 7 did something very similar and played 5 against 2, similar to a rondo again, keeping the ball away. The players designed their own rules, so they played open touch, so there was no touch restriction. 8 passes equaled a goal against the defender, and any attacking player giving the ball away to a defender switched positions and became the defender. Those pre-activities lasted for 10 minutes, and after that 10 minutes cycle, the players were called in, given the test running order, and then the test begun. The coach lined up adjacent to the finish line. He would let the player know how the start was going to be. Once he'd said 3, 2, 1, go, the coach would start his stopwatch and the sprint time would be started. The player was asked to run through the finish gate as fast as they could, and as the players finished, the coach would write down the score and then communicate with the player what their test score was. Waiting players who were not sprinting were asked to move very slowly adjacent to the sprint area to keep themselves warm and flexible, ready for when they came into their test. Once the players had concluded their first test, they were asked to move to the dynamic stretching area that was already set up for them. They had a soccer ball each in that area, and they were asked to juggle and move around slowly until everybody had completed their tests. Once everybody had completed their tests, the coach moved over to the dynamic stretching area and started the dynamic stretching time with the players, which lasted 5 minutes. Over that 5-minute period, minute 1 and minute 5 consisted of moving around with the soccer ball in a dynamic fashion. The players followed the coach's commands, which were ball manipulations such as toe taps, foundations, using the sole of the feet, as well as changes of direction. Minute 2 was players moving around without a soccer ball, and again they were following the coach's instructions with high knees, high heels, skipping, changing direction to continue through the dynamic warm-up. And then minutes 3 and 4, again without a soccer ball, and the coach would actually move around in a fashion where the players would to mimic, and these were dynamic stretches that would work on the hamstrings, the quads, the calves, upper body limb movements, neck rolls, ankle rolls, and just generally warm up the body through the dynamic stretching process. Moving to the next slide, this is actually a visual of what happened on the field, where the setup was, how big the areas were, what the players were doing when they arrived to the field, how they moved over to the sprint testing area, and then the dynamic stretching area to give you a visual of everything we did. Measurements and calculations with the coach. Measured the time it took for each player to sprint 20 meters before the dynamic stretching, and then again after the dynamic stretching, the coach again timed how long it would take the players to take. As we move into our results section, 8 of the 13 players tested improved their 20 meter test times after the 5-minute dynamic stretching period. The mean time for the sprint test for the dynamic stretch was 4.27 seconds, standard deviation 0.27, with the median being 4.2 seconds. The mean time for post-dynamic stretching was 4.17 seconds, standard deviation 0.28, with the median being 4.19 seconds. As we move through the PowerPoint, we're just giving you a visual of each player's score and how that compared to their first and their last, as well as the rest of the players comparing to each other. And then we move on to the next graph, which provides the difference in sprint times from sprint 1 and sprint 2. This shows an increase and decrease of seconds and percentages based on the information that we collected for 2 sprint times. A paired t-test was carried out, and on the pre and post dynamic stretch data. Statistical significance was accepted at p 0.05. The t-test produced a p-value of p 0.0301, which suggests there was a significant difference between the 2 tests taken on that day. And this goes to show the dynamic stretching in between the 20 meter sprints significantly helped improve the sprinting times for the players. As we move on to our discussion, there was many things to think about, many things to take into consideration. This was the first time these players had done such a test. Dynamic stretching is familiar to them, but it's not something they do every week. With the testing period only being done on one occasion, it would be good to repeat this over a sustained period to see how the players would react. We also took into consideration that we didn't test them very much prior to this, and maybe they were nervous and uncomfortable with the process, so doing this over a longer period might make them feel comfortable and help them improve. Different tests could be conducted with other groups as well to compare with the group that we tested on that day. There could also be different types of tests with different stretches, static, not stretching at all. One of the ideas could be to play just small-sided soccer games in between the 2 sprints, play handball games in between the 2 sprints, and see what type of results could come through different ideas like that. And then lastly, we put together our reference page, which will explain where we got our information and research from that helped us put together this paper and this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you very much for your time.